Join us as host Dorcas Utkovic visits Melbourne's Emerge in the West Festival, conducting insightful interviews with African Australian artists and advocates, showing a side to the community we rarely get to see in the mainstream media.
Here we are at Emerge in the West, one of the many festivals that celebrate African Australian cultures. And today we'll celebrate with song and dance, poetry, book launch, you name it, we've got it. So stick around and I'll take you around. Come on.
To everybody, tell them it's alright. We're not in position, just get you ready.
The significant immigration from Africa to Australia is only a recent trend, but Africans are making their mark, and with them, they bring vibrancy and colour to inspire the Australian fashion scene. We found some fashion here at the festival. I'm about to have a conversation with a beautiful black woman, Vissolela Ndenzako, who is a blogger, a documentary maker, and of course, a fashion maker. As part of Emerge in the West Festival, she curated the Contemporary African Fashion Show, and she joins me now. Tell me a little bit about this fashion show that you curated here.
Well, I was initially contacted last year by Multicultural Arts Victoria to put together a fashion show. And I thought, why not? It's an opportunity, first of all, to get all the various fashion designers and African fashion designers in Melbourne who are actually up and coming and trying to create, you know, a sort of an industry and obviously for themselves. It's also an opportunity for me to work creatively with other people.
And you've moved to Melbourne when you were about 9, is that right?
Yes, yes.
What's your experience in terms of the fashion so far?
Well, I think the biggest thing about fashion here is understanding the difference between contemporary and traditional.
Yep.
And I think as Africans, because we've obviously got that traditional background, we tend to want to balance the two of them together. Mm-hmm. And when we first came here, the availability of fabrics, tailors who would actually make something up for you, jewelry, hair accessories, none of that was available.
And you know, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm looking at you, and you've got your, you know, your African fabric little jacket, and you've got your, you know, your contemporary dress and your nice necklace. Is that the kind of thing that you're talking about? And is that the kind of thing that we can look forward to?
Definitely. It's no longer something that only Africans wear. It's become very, I guess, accessible to everyone. So it's actually a really good time to kind of introduce the, you know, the different more ethno blends coming through, whether it's from Africa or Asia or whatnot. So you're seeing a change on the catwalks.
Yes. How can people get involved with you? Like, you know, if Emerge in the West were to happen next year, how do you have a selection criteria? How do you go about that?
Look, I'm visually, you know, with fashion, it's all about the senses.
Yeah.
It's what you see and what's obviously, you know, visually works.
Have you got anything you want to share with, you know, young African Australians who aspire to be part of a fashion show or even, you know, be fashion makers, etc.?
I think professionalism is very important. You can't just have this thing that I'm an African fashion maker. That's not going to carry you in the industry. A lot of people I've worked with, I think one of the most important things is they don't educate themselves about how the fashion world actually operates. Mm-hmm. And there's a cycle, there's spring, summer, the seasons, and the level of organisation you need to be able to run a fashion business is immense.
And if you want to find out more about Vissolela, you can check out our website. Thank you so much for having this little sit down with me. I really appreciate it.
We're not in position, just get you ready. Watch out for this, we come in, that's the left, watch out for me now, we go way. To the left, to the right, everywhere we go. Jump up in the cross so you can jump.
Can't you see? This ain't just a decision for me.
One of the many activities taking place here at the festival is poetry, an art form with the power to transcend time and place. I caught up with the fabulous poets Soreti and Wani. Guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So let's get into it. Tell me about the set that you're doing later on, a collaboration between the two of you.
Yes, so basically it's a collaboration including also a little bit of our own poetry that we'll be doing individually. It's including, I think, 3 of my pieces and
Two or three of mine.
2 or 3 of yours, and then we've got a collab piece to finish it off with.
Wani, I know that you game and you study and you do word. Where do you get the time? Or how do you juggle it?
Well, I don't sleep much for one. And
I don't know. I think it's also part of my just daily living, creating and always making things happen. So I'm always up and down.
And do they kind of cross, or do they feed each other?
Well, actually, I use writing as my way of escaping everything. So that's my relaxation time. And like, I guess the spoken word side of it just comes in me saying what I've written. And so then to relate in that kind of sense.
Oh, and you,
Yes.
sugar cane.
Oh, sugar canes.
I love it.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Sugar canes was the first poem that I properly performed. And it's really interesting because I'm pretty sick of sugar canes because
I'm not.
There's always that one poem that you perform so many times
Yeah.
that you actually get sick of your own voice when you
Like
do
you
it.
start feeling sorry for the crowd.
Yeah, literally, it gets to that point. So I think
Are you performing sugar canes today?
I am performing sugar canes today, yeah. So I'm not that sick of it just yet. But yeah, it is one of my favourite of my own pieces, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, and it's so on point. I mean, I'm a mother to a little girl and a boy, but your message in it and the whole story around us black women having, being black is not a curse. It's a gift, and tell me more.
So that was kind of the trail I was taking. I did write it from the perspective of a mother, kind of, who was writing about her daughter. So when I wrote it, I was thinking about my mother writing about me, and like a lot of mothers have related to it in the same way. And so it really is about celebrating blackness, celebrating black women, and looking at all of the positive that exists within the black experience for women, which doesn't really happen often.
Because I have come to understand that my skin darkens beneath the roaring gaze of the sun only to shimmer wisdom into the depths of the night, and I will teach my daughter, my kin, my creation, that she too carries this burning hope and that she cannot fail.
What are you guys going to do with your poetry? Are you hoping to record it, write it down, publish a book? You're publishing something in June.
July.
Sorry.
Actually, I am.
Close enough.
It's me and a real good friend of mine. It's our first, I guess, collective poetic memoir piece, and we're just basically putting down from the journey of our writing experiences and our performance experiences and what we've seen and how we've grown through that, and we're basically putting it down in the book and seeing how that will go. So.
Thank you so much, guys, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks for having us. Thank you.
In keeping with the celebration, we acknowledge Abe Nouk's achievements and service to our society. He's a young Sudanese whom the ability to write and read has enriched his life in unimaginable ways. Abe stopped by at the festival for a chat.
He made his Australian debut on SBS's Living with the Enemy, a heart-wrenching documentary that revealed the extent of racial stereotyping in our society. Then he went on to become an ambassador for one of Australia's prominent fashion houses, Cotton On. And when he's not appearing on the small screen, Abe writes and performs poetry. And he joins me now to tell me more about his achievements. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, let's go back to the beginning, so to speak. Back to 2004. That was when you arrived here, isn't it?
Of course. I arrived here luckily with my siblings in 2004. And the quick settlement and the adjustment to everything that went from violence to calmness.
Was it what you hoped for? What you guys, when you left home, how was that experience when you got here?
I think as a youngster, growing up around with some friends, you never want to leave that environment. But of course, parents make decisions based on what they think is the best outcome for their children. And my mother imaginatively made that for the 8 of us. But of course, was it what I imagined? It still exceeds my expectation on a daily basis. I mean, every day I'm astounded by this reality.
With it, and then you started doing some work, and then you came across a very special book, 101 Disney Classic.
What struck me was the fact I couldn't read it. But in the back of my mind, I said, I should be able to read this.
And then, 2 years later, you were the runner-up at the Australian Slam Poetry.
2 years later, I didn't even know how to write properly. I didn't even know how to read properly. So most of the stuff that I was doing was based heavily on my imagination.
I was birthed in a society that decided to use its children as child soldiers. Instead of wearing nappies, we were wearing camouflage. Instead of baby bottles, they put guns in our hands and persuade us to think as men in advance.
You said somewhere that, poetry is storytelling, of course, and you said storytelling is our ancestral responsibility.
I was facilitating a workshop at Melbourne Grammar School, and after the teacher introduced me, they quickly ran off, and I was left with the students. And of course, they were sitting there with the expectation of me having to teach them. And so one of the students got up and said, if you teach me anything, I'll forget it, but if you tell me a story, I'll remember it. And in that moment, I threw all the material that I've prepared to come and facilitate a workshop.
Yeah.
And of course, the realization came in that instant that me and all these kids who've never crossed paths have suddenly have something in common, which just comes back to the basis that we embody our ancestors' languages and along the way, their stories.
Well, you've got your organization, the Youth
Creative
Rebellion.
Yes.
Yeah, is that where, you facilitate this and try to instill what you've learned into other younger ones?
I would meet with some of the kids who would come out of jail, and they would say certain things such as, I think I would rather go back in there for comfort. And then you realize, in a country like this, and young people are thinking in such a manner, and to have been so close to the environment and being affiliated with it, and you realize the lack of love that some of these young people get, the lack of acknowledgement and so on and so forth. And I've suffered the same thing. Creating Creative Rebellion Youth was pretty much to embody the simple philosophy that you don't have to have a prestige background.
And you've been traveling around Australia and the world. How was that?
What was shocking was getting the email to perform at Glastonbury.
Yes.
So I logged in and I'm thinking I must have logged into somebody else's email. So I had to log out and log back in again, just to kind of make it settle.
Yeah.
And then having to travel for the first time, and my mother said, look, you have to remember, no matter where you go, no matter how far you may think you'll go, it comes back to the basics of accepting people for who they are and treating them right.
Do you have anything you want to share with young, aspiring poets, writers, creatives?
Don't be anything that has a title. That limits who you can become and who you really want to be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Following our conversation, Abe received the 2015 Young Man of the Year Award, an accolade by Better Men Foundation, which recognizes the young man's positive contribution in their society, regardless of their circumstances. All around Australia, there are thousands of African students studying at universities, colleges, and training institutes. In Victoria, a new network bringing all these students together is African Australian Student Association. At Imagine the West, we were lucky to catch up with one of the founding members and president of the organization, Monica Forson.
Monica, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, tell me, why did you guys put this organization together?
So the Afro Australian Student Association was founded because my friend and I thought there was a need to unite African students together. So I was at Melbourne University and she was at Monash, and we thought, what about joining in with the other African student groups together? So this time last year we set up an organisation just at our universities, which has grown to all Victoria.
So how many universities are involved at the minute?
About 6 or 7 at the moment.
So how can they find out about you? Like, do you go to the universities and introduce yourself?
Most campuses have an African student group at the moment, and then they will be auspiced by ASO. So we provide events that are slightly different from the African student group. They provide social events, networking, partying, and we're more about how do we help students progress through employment options or through leadership development. So we want to work simultaneously with the student groups.
Like you say, in the other group that focuses on African students, they do more social stuff.
Yes.
And so you guys do more the employment. Can you give me an example?
There was a need to help African students get employment, so I met with the chairperson of the Morris Blackburn law firm in Melbourne, and he said, why don't we run a careers session? So about 50 young people attended, and from that, one person actually gained employment. So we're about providing real options and outcomes for young people.
Have you got any different sections that you concentrate on in terms of dealing with students?
Yep. So ASO works on a 3-pillared system. We have an employment pillar, leadership pillar, and a community pillar. So we try to help African students in 3 different areas. There's obviously the social side that the clubs deal with. Employment is about providing networking opportunities or actual employment to young people. Yeah. Leadership is about development and personal development. A lot of the times people complain about their resume and they're like, I can't get a job, but a lot of the times it's like, what are the extra things you're doing? And then community is to make sure that the African community and the community at large knows what we're doing and what are young people thinking of at the moment. So last year we held a session about mental health and identity. Maybe next year homosexuality in the African community. Just controversial topics we don't talk about at the dinner table. As part of our community pillar, we had the first Afro Australian Student Awards Night called the Recognise Awards Night, and that was really great. We had about 120 young people turn out, and the girl said it was really memorable for her because it was a community that came and said thank you and we acknowledge what you're doing.
Is this, the community work that you do with ASO, does it cross path with your studies at all, or did one create the other? Or?
I think I wanted to find a course I could do that I could put all my energies in community work together. So I love doing community work. I love organising events. I just love supporting the community, and that's what a social worker does, supports the need of the individual.
Today you've got a forum going on. Actually, before I let you go, tell me a little bit about the forum.
So we have a forum called The African Dream, and it speaks about when people leave Africa, they come here with all these hopes and dreams, but is it a reality once they arrive here? They've got their family back home that are expecting money, their dreams becoming a lawyer, a doctor, but is that really achievable? And if not, how do they circumvene those sorts of things? So, yeah.
And that's what you guys will be talking about.
Yes, it should be a quite lively debate.
It sounds like that. Yeah. I look forward to it. I might pop in to come and
great.
Have a little sit down. Thank you so much
Thank
again.
you.
And thank you for hanging out with me and Monica. And now I'm going to go find some more people at the festival. Come along.
To find out more about African Australian Student Organisation and their activities, head on to their website and Facebook page.
Guess what? I'm talking to Saba of Saba Health Foods, and they're doing some awesome thing here, which they're going to tell me what it is.
So this is a traditional Ethiopian coffee ceremony. So usually what happens is that there's 3 courses to the Ethiopian coffee ceremony. You have it in a little shot, and you get 3 shots. They get a little bit weaker as the shots proceed, but they're still pretty strong, so use a little sugar.
Awesome. Thank you. Ethiopian Eritrean coffee. Here I go. Oh my God!
It's good.
It's great.
It's good.
Hey, we're still here at Imagine the West. Welcome back. I am with Vicky. Vicky's got a beautiful stall here. And Vicky, how did you get involved with this festival?
Well, I'm from Papua New Guinea, and I was connecting or getting in touch with Multicultural Arts probably in 2010.
Yeah.
So I've been with them the whole time, and I do weaving.
Oh, you do? Is this old stuff? Is it done by you?
Yeah, all of this is done by me. This is called a bilum. Bilum means a bag, and it's from Papua New Guinea. So I teach the people how to do the technique.
Thank you so much, Vicky, for chatting to me. Good luck with your stall, and I hope to see you at the next Imagine the West.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I did promise you a book launch, and here it is.
I'm having a conversation with the talented Kabu Okai-Davies, who is a playwright, a novelist, a poet, anything to do with the word, so I'm just going to call him a wordsmith. And he joins me now. Thank you so much for joining me, Kabu.
Thank you.
Today you're launching your book, Cafew's Children, here at the festival. Can you tell us a little bit about the book?
So I write about growing up in Ghana from maybe before I was born all the way to when I was 13.
Yeah.
Normally you get the convict story, the Gallipoli story, the Anzac. We are trying to relocate our stories into Australia so that 100 years from now, if you start with the convicts, at least you get to the boat people, then you get to the refugees, then you get to the migrants, and migrants who created bigger stories that have now become part of an Australian mainstream narrative.
So in this book, there's bits from Australia or and Africa?
It's mostly about Africa, but I made reference to the fact that being in Australia made it possible for me to talk back at Africa. And it also happened because mentally and emotionally, I have embraced the idea of being an Australian. You know, in Africa, our grandfathers or our great-grandfathers told us their story. It wasn't written. And because of that, a lot of the stories are lost. This book is a document.
Now, when you were writing this book, Cafew's Children, I know you did a lot of extensive research, of course, and you went back home. In terms of censoring, because we know the mind is a powerful place and, you know, it can censor, it can reveal and conceal. Were you ever worried about censoring yourself in the story that you're trying to tell, or?
Basically, what you do as a writer, especially when you do what I call the archaeology of memory, you're going back to dig.
Yes.
What you bring out may not be exact. You may find some artifacts, but you have to create an impression. Let me put it this way. You always remember a hug from your mom.
Yes.
It may not feel the same, but that moment, you know, and that is basically what I try to create.
Yeah.
Fiction is not exact, but fiction gives life to the past. Fiction gives meaning to the present, and fiction gives hope for the future. Yes.
And just finally, do you have any, you know, advice to young or old, older, I should say, Australian, African Australian people who aspire to be writers or tell their stories while they're here?
At the core of our thinking processes is the phenomena of reading and writing. Once you understand it, you will not live a day without reading or writing something. And of course, we are texting, we are reading. These are all byproducts of the original concept itself. So you have to read, you have to write, and start writing your story. Even if you don't publish it, write a journal, keep a book, and put your story in it.
You heard it. Go read and start writing your stories. And let's share our beautiful stories with Australia. As I continue to enjoy myself at the festival, I bid you farewell. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Dorcas Utkovic. Love and light to you.